Let me ask you something. When was the last time you felt truly understood by someone, not just heard, but understood? That moment when someone smiled at you, called you by name, and made you feel like the most important person in the room. Now imagine if you could make others feel like that, consistently, effortlessly, and sincerely. That's not just charm, my friend. That's influence. And it's not reserved for the naturally gifted. It's a skill, one anyone can learn. You see, through years of working with business people, students, salesmen, and secretaries alike, I discovered something extraordinary. Success in life so often comes down to how we handle people, not money, not talent, not even education. People. Win their trust and doors fly open. Miss that mark and even genius goes unheard. In this message, I want to give you 10 timeless principles, each one forged from decades of observation, interviews, and real human interaction. These are not tricks. They are not gimmicks. They are truths about human nature, principles that, if practiced with sincerity, can make you unforgettable in the eyes of others. And if you find value in these principles, as I know you will, go ahead and subscribe to our channel. We're here to help you grow, connect, and influence with integrity. Now let's get into it, because principle number 4, that one might just change the way you approach every conversation from here on out. The only way to get anyone to do anything. Let me share with you the most powerful secret I've discovered in all my years of studying human nature. It's a truth so fundamental, yet so often overlooked, that once you truly understand it, it will transform every interaction you have for the rest of your life. Here it is. The only way to get anyone to do anything is to make them want to do it. Think about that for a moment. Not to force them, not to coerce them, not to manipulate them, but to make them genuinely want to take action. I remember sitting in my office years ago, watching a frustrated father trying to get his teenage son to study harder. He had tried everything: threats, punishments, rewards, lectures. Nothing worked. The more he pushed, the more his son resisted. Then I asked him a simple question. Have you ever tried to understand why your son might want to study? The father looked at me, confused. Want to study? Nobody wants to study? But that's where he was wrong. People want to achieve. They want to grow. They want to succeed. What they resist is being forced into someone else's vision of success. Consider this. Every action you take, every decision you make is driven by something you want. Even when you do things you don't particularly enjoy, you do them because you want something that comes as a result. You don't pay taxes because you love giving away money. You pay them because you want to avoid penalties and contribute to a functioning society. You don't wake up early because you enjoy leaving a warm bed. You do it because you want the benefits that come with starting your day early. This understanding that human action is driven by desire rather than force is the foundation of real influence. I once worked with a manager who was struggling with her team's performance. She had tried everything in her power to make them work harder: strict deadlines, performance reviews, close monitoring, but productivity kept declining. When we analyzed her approach, we discovered she was trying to force behavior rather than inspire it. We shifted her focus to understanding what her team members wanted, what were their aspirations, what made them feel valued, what did success look like in their eyes. The transformation was remarkable. By aligning team goals with individual desires, she created an environment where people wanted to give their best. Productivity didn't just improve, it soared. This principle extends beyond the workplace. It applies to every human interaction you'll ever have. Want your children to clean their rooms? Don't focus on forcing them to do it. Help them want a clean, organized space. Want your spouse to be more supportive of your career? Don't demand it. Help them see how your success contributes to shared dreams and goals. But here's the crucial part. This isn't about manipulation. It's about genuine understanding and alignment. You can't fake this. People can sense insincerity from miles away. The key is to dig deeper, to truly understand what drives people. What are their hopes, their fears, their dreams? What makes them feel alive, valued, important. When you understand these things, you don't need to force or coerce. You can create situations where what you want aligns naturally with what they want. This is the art of influence at its highest level, not bending others to your will, but finding the point where your desires and theirs intersect. Remember, force creates resistance, coercion breeds resentment, but genuine desire, that creates unstoppable momentum. As we continue our journey through these principles, keep this fundamental truth in mind. Everything we discuss, every technique we explore, builds upon this foundation. The only way to get anyone to do anything is to make them want to do it. Master this principle, and you'll never need to push, force, or coerce again. You'll understand the true nature of influence, creating alignment between what you want and what others naturally desire. The magic ingredient: sincere appreciation. There's a force so powerful that it can transform relationships, open closed doors, and move mountains of resistance. Yet it's so rare that when people encounter it, they never forget the experience. I'm talking about sincere appreciation. Let me be clear. This isn't about flattery. Flattery is counterfeit appreciation, and like any counterfeit, it's worse than worthless. It's dangerous. People can smell insincerity from a mile away, and once detected, it destroys trust faster than almost anything else. No, what I'm talking about is something far more profound. It's the ability to see the genuine worth in others and help them see it too. I remember a conversation I had with a janitor at a major university. For 40 years, he had kept the physics building spotless. When I asked him about his work, his eyes lit up. You know, he said, some of the greatest discoveries in quantum mechanics happened right here, in rooms I've kept clean. I like to think I played a small part in that. That man understood something profound about his work that many of his supervisors had missed. And you know what? That building was immaculate. Not because someone was watching over him, but because he took genuine pride in contributing to something greater than himself. This is the power of genuine appreciation. It's not just about making people feel good. It's about recognizing the real value they bring to the world. Consider this story. A young executive once approached me, frustrated with her team's performance. "I don't understand," she said. "I thank them all the time. I even bought them all gift cards last month. But nothing seems to work." When we dug deeper, we discovered she was going through the motions of appreciation without really seeing her team members as individuals. She was appreciating what they did, but not who they were. We worked together to change her approach. Instead of generic thank yous, she began to notice and acknowledge specific contributions. She learned about her team members' unique challenges and aspirations. She started seeing them as whole people, not just employees. The transformation was remarkable. Within weeks, team energy shifted, productivity increased, but more importantly, the entire office culture changed. People started appreciating each other more genuinely, creating a virtuous cycle of recognition and growth. Here's something crucial to understand. True appreciation requires attention. You can't appreciate what you don't notice. This means developing the habit of really seeing others, their efforts, their struggles, their small victories. Think about someone in your life right now. Perhaps a colleague, a family member, or even a service worker you regularly interact with. What do they do that makes your life better? What challenges do they overcome to provide that value? What unique qualities do they bring to their role? Now, imagine expressing that appreciation in a way that shows you've really noticed these things. Not just a casual thanks, but a specific acknowledgement of their unique contribution. I once witnessed a senior partner at a law firm transform a seemingly ordinary interaction with the office's night cleaning staff. Instead of the usual nod, he took time to learn their names and understand their challenges. He noticed that one of them traveled 2 hours each way to work. Instead of just sympathizing, he acknowledged her dedication. "Maria, your commitment to excellence, even with such a long commute, helps keep this office running smoothly." We couldn't serve our clients effectively without your contribution. That simple moment of genuine appreciation did more than make Maria feel good. It validated the importance of her role in the organization's mission. Remember, appreciation is not about what you want to get from others. It's about what you want to give. When you approach it with this mindset, something magical happens. People don't just hear your words, they feel your sincerity. This is why appreciation is called the magic ingredient. Like all magic, it can't be faked. But when it's real, when it comes from a place of genuine recognition and respect, it has the power to transform relationships, inspire greatness, and open doors you never knew existed. As we move forward, keep this truth close to your heart. Every person you meet has value, waiting to be recognized. Your ability to sincerely appreciate that value might just be the key that unlocks their potential and your own. Principle number 1, don't criticize, condemn, or complain. Let me share with you a story about one of the wisest men in American history, Abraham Lincoln. During the darkest days of the Civil War, Lincoln wrote a letter to General Meade, expressing his deep disappointment in the general's failure to pursue Lee's army after Gettysburg. This failure, Lincoln believed, had cost them the opportunity to end the war then and there. The letter was sharp, critical, and absolutely justified. And do you know what Lincoln did with it? He never sent it. It was found in his papers after his death, signed, but undelivered. Lincoln had learned what many never do. Criticism, no matter how valid, rarely achieves its intended effect. This brings us to our first principle, one that might seem simple but runs counter to human nature itself. Don't criticize, condemn, or complain. Now, I can hear your thoughts already. But sometimes criticism is necessary. How else can we correct mistakes? How else can we improve? These are natural questions, but they miss a fundamental truth about human nature. Consider this. When was the last time someone's criticism fundamentally changed your beliefs or behavior? When was the last time being condemned made you genuinely want to improve? When has someone's complaint about you inspired real change? I remember working with a father who was frustrated with his teenage daughter's messy room. Every morning he would lecture her about responsibility, criticize her habits, and complain about her attitude. And every morning her room got messier. The more he criticized, the more she resisted. Then we tried a different approach. Instead of criticism, we focused on understanding. Instead of condemnation, we explored what organization meant to her. Instead of complaints, we discussed how she wanted her space to feel. The transformation wasn't instant, but it was profound. Within weeks, she started organizing her room, not because of fear or guilt, but because she wanted to. By removing criticism from the equation, we removed the need for resistance. You see, criticism is like trying to train a horse by whipping it. You might get temporary compliance, but you'll never win its heart. And without the heart, any change is superficial and temporary. But here's what makes this principle so challenging. Our instinct to criticize often comes from a good place. We want to help. We want to improve things. We want to make situations better. The problem isn't with our intentions, it's with our methods. Let me share another story. There was a brilliant software engineer I worked with who had a habit of finding fault in everyone's code. His criticisms were usually technically correct, but his team's productivity was plummeting. People were afraid to innovate, afraid to take risks, afraid to grow. We worked together to transform his approach. Instead of pointing out errors, he started highlighting opportunities for enhancement. Instead of condemning different coding styles, he began exploring the reasoning behind them. Instead of complaining about standards not being met, he started conversations about what excellence looked like to the team. The results? Code quality improved more rapidly than it ever had under his critical approach. But more importantly, team innovation soared. By creating an environment free from criticism, he created space for growth. Remember this: people may be illogical, unreasonable, and self-centered. Love them anyway. If you do good, people will accuse you of selfish ulterior motives. Do good anyway. The biggest people with the biggest ideas can be shot down by the smallest people with the smallest minds. Think big anyway. This principle isn't about ignoring problems. It's about addressing them in a way that actually works. Instead of criticism, offer understanding. Instead of condemnation, provide encouragement. Instead of complaints, present solutions. Think about someone you need to address an issue with right now. Before you speak, ask yourself, will my words invite defensiveness or openness? Am I trying to prove them wrong or help them improve? Am I focused on past mistakes or future possibilities? The real power of this principle lies not in what you avoid doing, but in what it allows to happen. When people don't feel attacked, they don't need to defend. When they don't feel condemned, they don't need to justify. When they don't hear complaints, they can listen to suggestions. This is the foundation upon which all other principles of human relations are built. Master this, and you've already won half the battle in winning friends and influencing people. Principle number 2, give honest, sincere appreciation. I want you to think about the last time someone gave you a compliment that touched your soul. Not a casual good job or a quick thanks, but a moment of recognition so genuine that you still remember it today. That feeling you're recalling right now, that's the power of honest, sincere appreciation. But here's the challenge. In a world of quick likes and casual praise, we've almost forgotten what real appreciation looks like. We've reduced it to automatic responses and generic acknowledgments. Great work. Nice job. Thanks. These phrases, while well-intentioned, barely scratch the surface of true appreciation. Let me share a story that illustrates the difference. There was a cleaning lady at a major hospital who had been working there for 25 years. Every day she would receive casual thanks from doctors and nurses rushing past. But one day, a young resident stopped and said something different. "Mary, I've noticed how you always take extra care with the children's rooms, the way you arrange their stuffed animals and make their beds so perfectly. It helps them feel less scared in this strange place. You're not just keeping rooms clean, you're helping these kids heal." Mary later told me she'd never forget that moment. It wasn't just what the resident said. It was that he had truly seen her contribution. For the first time in 25 years, someone had recognized not just what she did, but why it mattered. This brings us to our second principle. Give honest, sincere appreciation. Notice I didn't say praise or compliments. Appreciation is different. It requires 3 elements that make it transformative: specificity, sincerity, and significance. Specificity means noticing and acknowledging particular actions or qualities. Instead of saying, "You're a great employee," you might say, "The way you handled that difficult client yesterday, staying calm and finding a creative solution that showed real leadership." Sincerity comes from truly seeing the value in what you're appreciating. You can't fake this. People have an almost supernatural ability to detect insincerity, but when your appreciation is genuine, they can feel it in their bones. Significance means connecting their actions to a larger impact. Help people see how their efforts contribute to something bigger than themselves. Show them how their work touches others' lives. I remember working with a manager who was struggling with team morale. She thought she was appreciative. She gave out regular bonuses and said thank you often. But her team still felt undervalued. When we dug deeper, we discovered why. Her appreciation was generic and transactional. We worked together to transform her approach. Instead of just saying "good job" after a project, she started noticing and acknowledging specific contributions. She learned about the challenges each team member had overcome. She connected their individual efforts to the company's larger mission. The change was remarkable. Within months, her department had the highest engagement scores in the company. But more importantly, the nature of the work itself changed. People weren't just doing their jobs. They were investing themselves in their roles. Here's a truth that might surprise you. The deepest human hunger isn't for food, shelter, or even success. It's for appreciation, to be valued, to know that our existence matters. When you understand this, you understand the true power of appreciation. But remember, this isn't about manipulation. The moment appreciation becomes a tool for getting what you want, it loses its power. True appreciation must come from a genuine recognition of others' worth. Try this exercise. Think of someone who makes your life better in some way. It could be a colleague, a family member, or even a stranger who provides a service you rely on. Now think about 3 specific things they do that you value. What challenges do they overcome to provide these things? How does their contribution affect others? What would be different if they weren't there? Now imagine sharing these observations with them, not as casual praise, but as sincere recognition of their value. This is the art of appreciation. I've seen appreciation transform hostile work environments into collaborative spaces. I've watched it heal fractured relationships and rebuild broken trust. I've observed it turn routine jobs into meaningful careers, because when you truly appreciate someone, when you take the time to see their value and help them see it too, you're not just making them feel good, you're helping them become better. You're creating an environment where growth is natural and excellence is inevitable. Master this principle, and you'll never need to coerce or cajole again. People naturally give their best to those who sincerely value them. Principle number 3, arouse in the other person an eager want picture yourself, standing at the foot of a mountain. At the top is something you desperately want someone else to do. You have 2 choices. You can try to push them up that mountain, fighting against the weight of their resistance every step of the way. Or you can help them discover their own desire to climb it. This brings us to our 3rd principle, one that transforms the very nature of influence. Arouse in the other person an eager want. This principle is so powerful that once you master it, the way you approach every human interaction will change forever. Let me share a story that illustrates this profound truth. There was a father who was struggling with his 8-year-old son's reading habits. Every night was a battle. The father would insist on reading time, the son would resist, and both would end up frustrated and angry. Then, one day, the father tried something different. Instead of demanding reading time, he started sharing exciting stories from books at dinner. He'd stop at the most interesting parts, leaving his son hungry for more. He began keeping fascinating books about dinosaurs, his son's passion, invisible places around the house. Within weeks, the son was asking for reading time. The mountain hadn't changed, but now the child wanted to climb it. This is the essence of arousing an eager want. It's not about manipulation or clever tricks. It's about understanding what naturally motivates people and aligning your goals with their desires. I remember working with a sales manager who was frustrated with her team's performance. She had tried everything: increased commissions, sales, contests, even threats of termination. Nothing worked. When we analyzed her approach, we discovered she was focusing entirely on what she wanted: higher sales numbers. We shifted her strategy completely. Instead of talking about sales targets, she began helping her team understand how their work improved their customers' lives. She shared stories of clients whose businesses had grown because of their products. She helped her team see themselves, not as salespeople, but as business growth consultants. The transformation was remarkable. Sales didn't just improve, they soared. Because now her team wasn't just selling products, they were fulfilling their own desire to make a difference in people's lives. Here's a fundamental truth about human nature. Everyone wants something. The master key to influence is discovering what that something is and showing them how they can get it by doing what you'd like them to do. Think about this in your own life. When you want someone to take action, do you start with what you want, or do you begin by understanding what they want? The difference between these approaches is the difference between pushing a boulder uphill and letting it roll downhill naturally. I once observed a brilliant example of this principle in action. A company CEO needed to implement a major change that would require significant extra effort from his employees. Instead of simply announcing the change, he spent weeks meeting with small groups of employees, understanding their frustrations with the current system, their hopes for their careers, their ideas for improvement. When he finally presented the change initiative, he didn't focus on corporate metrics or market demands. Instead, he showed how this change would address the very things his employees had been wanting: more efficient processes, clearer career paths, better work-life balance. The change wasn't just accepted, it was embraced. But here's the crucial point: this isn't about manipulation. You can't create desire where none exists. You can't force someone to want something. What you can do is help people see how what you're proposing aligns with what they already want. Consider these questions before your next important interaction. What does this person value most? What are their current frustrations? What are their hopes and dreams? How does what I'm proposing help them achieve what they want? Remember, people may listen politely when you tell them what you want, but they become truly engaged when you show them how to get what they want. I've seen this principle transform parent-child relationships, revolutionize sales approaches, and turn hostile negotiations into collaborative problem-solving sessions. Because when you help others see how their deepest desires align with your proposals, you don't need to push or persuade. They eagerly join you on the journey. This is the art of arousing an eager want. It's not about creating artificial desire. It's about understanding genuine human needs and showing how they can be fulfilled through the actions you're suggesting. Master this principle, and you'll never need to force or coerce again. Because when people eagerly want what you're proposing, influence becomes effortless. Principle number 4. Become genuinely interested in other people. Let me tell you about two people I once observed at a business conference. Both were trying to network, both wanted to make connections, but their approaches couldn't have been more different. The first person moved from group to group, talking enthusiastically about his accomplishments, his company, his goals. He handed out dozens of business cards. He spoke to countless people, yet by the end of the evening, he had made no real connections. The second person took a different approach. She asked questions. She listened intently. She showed genuine curiosity about others' work, their challenges, their aspirations. She handed out fewer cards but collected more. And more importantly, she built relationships that lasted long after. The conference ended. This brings us to our fourth principle: become genuinely interested in other people. Notice I say genuinely. This isn't about pretending to care. It's about cultivating real curiosity about the human beings around you. I once worked with a young man who considered himself painfully shy. I never know what to say, he told me. I feel awkward in conversations. His solution had been to avoid social situations whenever possible, but this was holding back his career, his relationships, his life. We started with a simple shift. Instead of focusing on what to say, we focused on what to ask. Instead of worrying about being interesting, he learned to be interested. The transformation was remarkable. Within months, this shy person had become known as one of the best conversationalists in his company. You see, people are fascinating if you truly pay attention. Every person you meet is living a story as rich and complex as your own. They have hopes, fears, dreams, and challenges. They have expertise you don't have, experiences you haven't had, perspectives you haven't considered. Think about this. When was the last time someone showed genuine interest in your life, your work, your passions? How did it make you feel? That feeling of being truly seen and heard is rare, and therefore incredibly valuable. I remember a CEO who was struggling with high turnover in his company. He had tried everything: better benefits, higher salaries, improved office conditions. Nothing seemed to work. When we analyzed the situation, we discovered something surprising. People weren't leaving because of money or benefits. They were leaving because they felt unknown, unheard, unvalued. We implemented a simple change. The CEO began spending 30 minutes each day walking through the office not to check on work, but to learn about his people. He asked about their families, their hobbies, their challenges. He remembered details and followed up in later conversations. Within 6 months, turnover had dropped dramatically, productivity increased, company culture transformed. All because one leader decided to become genuinely interested in his people. But here's what makes this principle challenging. It requires real effort. You can't fake interest for long. People can sense when your curiosity is genuine and when it's manufactured. The good news is that genuine interest can be cultivated. Start with this exercise. The next time you're in a conversation, make it your mission to learn 3 interesting things about the other person. Not surface details, but real insights. What drives them? What challenges them? What excites them? I once watched a master salesperson at work. Instead of launching into his pitch, he spent the first 20 minutes asking his prospect questions about their business. Not generic questions, but thoughtful inquiries that showed he really wanted to understand their operation. By the time he started talking about his product, the prospect was already engaged and receptive. This principle works because it satisfies one of our deepest human needs, the need to be understood. When you show genuine interest in others, you're not just collecting information, you're acknowledging their value as human beings. Remember, people are not interruptions to your work. They are your work. Every person you meet has something to teach you, something to share, something to contribute to your understanding of the world. I've seen this principle transform the most unlikely people into magnetic personalities, not because they became more charismatic or learned clever conversation techniques, but because they developed genuine curiosity about others. A shy computer programmer I worked with discovered that every person in his office had a unique story about how they got into technology. By showing genuine interest in these stories, he built a network of relationships that advanced his career far more effectively than any technical skill could have. The beauty of this principle is that it creates a virtuous cycle. The more genuinely interested you become in others, the more interesting they find you. The more you learn about people, the more fascinating they become. The more you understand others, the more effectively you can connect with them. Master this principle, and you'll never lack for friends or opportunities. Because when you become genuinely interested in others, they naturally become interested in you. Principle number 5, smile. Sometimes the most powerful principles are also the simplest. This brings us to our 5th principle, one so basic that you might be tempted to dismiss it. Smile. But don't let its simplicity fool you. A genuine smile is more than a facial expression. It's a force that can transform relationships, open doors, and change the entire atmosphere of a room. Let me share a story that illustrates the extraordinary power of a smile. In the depths of the Cold War, at a particularly tense moment between the United States and the Soviet Union, President Ronald Reagan met with Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev. The atmosphere was icy, the stakes were enormous, and decades of mistrust hung in the air. Then Reagan did something unexpected. As he approached Gorbachev, he broke into a warm, genuine smile. Gorbachev, almost involuntarily, smiled back. In that moment, something shifted. The tension didn't disappear, but it eased enough for real dialogue to begin. Later, both leaders would point to that first exchange of smiles as a crucial moment in thawing the Cold War. Now, I'm not suggesting that a smile alone can solve international conflicts. But this story illustrates something profound about human nature. A genuine smile has the power to disarm, to connect, to transform. Think about your own experience. When was the last time you encountered someone with a genuine smile? How did it make you feel? There's something almost magical about it, isn't there? It's like a ray of sunshine breaking through clouds. It changes everything it touches. I once worked with a woman who was brilliant at her job, but struggled to connect with her team. Her technical skills were impeccable, but her serious demeanor created a wall between her and others. When we discussed this, she said something revealing. "I'm too focused on important work to worry about smiling." This mindset, that smiling somehow diminishes seriousness or professionalism, is a costly misconception. We work together to help her understand that a smile isn't a sign of frivolity. It's a signal of openness, warmth, and confidence. The transformation in her workplace was remarkable. As she began to smile more naturally and genuinely, her team became more responsive. Communication improved, collaboration increased, even productivity went up, all because one person understood the power of a smile. But here's what's crucial. To understand, I'm not talking about plastering a fake smile on your face. People can spot an insincere smile from a mile away. A fake smile can do more harm than no smile at all. What I'm talking about is developing the habit of genuine smiling, the kind that comes from a place of real warmth and goodwill. Consider this. Scientists have discovered that the simple act of smiling, even when you don't feel particularly happy, can actually make you feel better. It triggers the release of dopamine, endorphins, and serotonin, nature's feel-good chemicals. When you smile, you don't just look happier, you actually become happier. I remember a fascinating experiment conducted at a large retail chain. They asked half their customer service representatives to consciously smile during phone calls with customers. The results were stunning. The smiling representatives resolved complaints more effectively, received better customer satisfaction scores, and reported less stress at the end of their shifts. Why? Because a smile isn't just something people see, it's something they can hear. It changes the tone of your voice, the energy of your words, the entire quality of your interaction. Here's a simple exercise. Tomorrow morning, make a conscious decision to smile at the first 3 people you meet. Not a polite grimace or a quick grin, but a genuine warm smile. Notice their reactions. Notice how it makes you feel. Notice how it changes the quality of your interactions. I've seen this principle transform the most challenging situations. A nervous job candidate who won over the interview panel with a genuine smile. A tense negotiation that shifted course when one party had the courage to smile warmly. A teacher who turned around a difficult class by starting each day with a real smile. But remember, this isn't about manipulation. It's about cultivating genuine warmth and goodwill toward others. A real smile comes from a place of authentic, positive regard for others. It's a gift you give freely, expecting nothing in return. The beauty of this principle is that it creates a virtuous cycle. When you smile genuinely at others, they naturally smile back. When they smile, you feel even more like smiling. It's a self-reinforcing cycle of positive energy that can transform relationships, environments, and opportunities. Master this principle, and you'll possess one of the most powerful tools for connecting with others, because a genuine smile isn't just an expression, it's an invitation to connect, to trust, to engage. And in our increasingly disconnected world, such invitations are more valuable than ever. Principle number 6. Remember that a person's name is to that person the sweetest sound. There's a moment I'll never forget from my years of teaching human relations. A successful CEO was attending one of my seminars, and during a break he shared something remarkable. "You know what my biggest regret is?" he said. "For 20 years, I've walked past people in my company's hallways without knowing their names. I've probably lost 1,000 opportunities to connect with the very people who make my success possible." This brings us to our 6th principle. Remember that a person's name is to that person the sweetest sound in any language. It's a principle so powerful that mastering it alone can transform your ability to connect with others. Consider this truth. Your name is not just what people call you, it's the anchor of your identity. It's one of the first gifts you receive in life. It's how you understand yourself as a distinct individual. When someone remembers and uses your name, they're not just identifying you, they're acknowledging your unique existence in the world. I once worked with a hospital administrator who was facing a crisis of staff morale. The hospital was large. The work was stressful, and people felt anonymous and undervalued. We implemented one simple change. She committed to learning the names of every person on her staff, not just the doctors and nurses, but the cleaners, the cafeteria workers, the maintenance team. It wasn't easy. There were over 300 people to remember, but she developed a system. She would take photos of new employees with their permission, write down details about them, and review these daily. She made it her mission to greet each person by name whenever she saw them. The transformation was remarkable. Employee satisfaction scores rose dramatically. Turnover decreased. Even patient satisfaction improved. Why? Because when people feel seen and acknowledged, they bring their best selves to their work. But here's what makes this principle challenging. In our fast-paced world, we've become lazy about names. We convince ourselves we're bad with names, or that remembering names isn't important. Nothing could be further from the truth. I remember a young sales professional who was struggling to build his client base. His presentations were excellent. His product knowledge was impressive, but something was missing. When we analyzed his approach, we discovered he was relying on generic greetings. Sir, ma'am, folks, rather than using names. We worked together to develop his name memory skills. He started keeping detailed notes about clients, including not just their names, but how to pronounce them correctly. He began using names naturally in conversation, neither too frequently, which can feel manipulative, nor too rarely, which can feel impersonal. Within 6 months, his sales had doubled, but more importantly, he had built genuine relationships with his clients. They weren't just customers anymore. They were individuals he knew and cared about. Here's a powerful technique for remembering names. When you're introduced to someone, really listen to their name. Don't let your mind wander to what you're going to say next. If you didn't hear it clearly, ask them to repeat it. People appreciate this more than you might think. Use their name immediately in conversation, but naturally. Create associations. Connect their name to something memorable about them. Before leaving a conversation, use their name one final time, but remember, this isn't about mechanical memorization. It's about genuine interest in the person behind the name. When you care about people, remembering their names becomes natural. I've seen this principle open doors that seemed permanently closed. A job candidate who remembered not just the interviewer's name, but also the receptionist's name, and got hired partly because of what that revealed about his character. A new employee who made it her mission to learn everyone's name in her department within her first week, and found herself rapidly promoted because of the relationship she built. The power of using someone's name extends beyond individual interactions. It can transform entire organizations. I worked with a retail chain that made one simple change. They required all customer service representatives to ask for and use customers' names during interactions. Customer satisfaction scores rose by 23% in 3 months, but here's a crucial warning. Using names incorrectly can be worse than not using them at all. Mispronouncing someone's name, using the wrong name, or using names too frequently can all damage relationships rather than strengthen them. The key is to be genuine and respectful. Think about your own experience. How do you feel when someone remembers your name from a brief meeting weeks ago? How does it feel when someone consistently mispronounces your name or forgets it entirely? The difference between these experiences is the difference between feeling valued and feeling invisible. Master this principle, and you'll possess one of the most powerful tools for building genuine connections with others. Because when you remember and use someone's name thoughtfully, you're not just identifying them, you're honoring their unique place in the world. Principle number 7, be a good listener. Encourage others to talk about themselves. Let me tell you about 2 conversations I recently observed. In the first, a senior executive was meeting with a potential client. The executive spoke eloquently about his company's achievements, their innovative solutions, their impressive client list. He talked for 45 minutes straight. The potential client smiled politely and never called back. In the second conversation, a junior sales representative met with a different client. She asked thoughtful questions, listened intently, and spoke perhaps 20% of the time. The client left having signed a contract twice as large as expected. This brings us to our seventh principle. Be a good listener and encourage others to talk about themselves. It's a principle so powerful that mastering it can transform not just your professional life, but every relationship you have. Think about the last time someone truly listened to you. Not just waited for their turn to speak, not just nodded while thinking about something else, but really listened. How rare is that experience? How valuable? I once worked with a manager who was brilliant but struggling to lead his team. His presentations were masterful, his strategies innovative, his work ethic impressive. But his team was disengaged and turnover was high. When we analyzed the situation, we discovered something striking. He had never really listened to his team members. We implemented a simple change. Every day he would spend 30 minutes just listening to his team. Not directing, not solving, not advising, just listening. The transformation was remarkable. Within months, his department had become the most productive in the company. But here's what makes this principle challenging. Real listening is hard work. It requires three things that don't come naturally to most of us: silence, focus, and genuine curiosity. I remember working with a woman who considered herself a great conversationalist. "I'm always ready with a response," she told me proudly. But when we recorded some of her interactions, she was shocked. She wasn't listening. She was just waiting to speak. Every story someone shared reminded her of her own story. Every problem mentioned triggered her own solution. We worked together to develop true listening skills. She learned to resist the urge to interrupt, to let silence exist without filling it, to ask questions that deepened understanding rather than redirected conversation. The change in her relationships was profound. Here's what real listening looks like. Give your complete attention, put away your phone, turn away from your computer. Face the person speaking, listen with your whole body, maintain appropriate eye contact, nod when appropriate. Let your posture show engagement. Ask questions that show you're following and care about understanding more. Resist the urge to offer solutions unless specifically asked. Pay attention to what's not being said, tone, body language, emotional undertones. But remember, this isn't about passive silence. It's about active engagement. Good listening is a dance between attention and encouragement, between silence and response. I've seen this principle transform the most challenging situations. A marriage counselor I worked with shared a fascinating observation. The success rate of couples therapy increased dramatically when partners learned to truly listen to each other. Not to defend, not to prepare counterarguments, but to truly understand. Consider this story. A negotiation between two companies had reached a deadlock. Both sides were frustrated, both convinced they were right. Then one negotiator did something unexpected. He stopped arguing and started listening. Really, listening. He asked questions about the other company's concerns, their constraints, their goals. Within hours, they found a solution that satisfied both parties. The power of this principle extends beyond professional situations. I remember a father who was struggling to connect with his teenage daughter. Their conversations had become a series of lectures and eye rolls. We worked on transforming these interactions. Instead of telling, he started asking. Instead of lecturing, he started listening. The change wasn't immediate, but it was profound. As his daughter realized her father was genuinely interested in her thoughts and feelings, she began to open up. Their relationship transformed from confrontation to conversation. But here's a crucial point. Encouraging others to talk about themselves isn't about manipulation. It's about creating space for authentic self-expression. People don't just want to talk. They want to be heard, understood, validated. Think about your own conversations. How often do you find yourself thinking about your response while someone else is speaking? How often do you interrupt with your own story or solution? How often do you miss the emotional content of what's being said because you're focused on the facts? Master this principle, and you'll possess one of the most valuable skills in human relations. Because in a world where everyone is talking, true listeners become invaluable. They build deeper relationships, understand situations more clearly, and find solutions others miss. Remember, the person speaking isn't just sharing information, they're sharing themselves. Honor that gift with your full attention, and you'll be amazed at how relationships deepen and opportunities unfold. Principle number 8, talk in terms of the other person's interests. Let me share with you a story about two brothers who owned competing fishing supply stores in the same town. The first brother filled his store with what he loved: expensive fly fishing, gear, specialty items for advanced anglers, and high-end equipment. The second brother did something different. He studied his customers. He learned what they actually wanted to buy, what problems they needed to solve, what dreams they hoped to fulfill. Within a year, the second brother's store was thriving while the first struggled to stay open. The difference? One brother talked about what interested him. The other talked about what interested his customers. This brings us to our 8th principle. Talk in terms of the other person's interests. It's a principle so fundamental that it can transform every conversation you have, every presentation you give, every relationship you build. Consider this truth. People's favorite subject isn't your product, your idea, or your story. It's their own interests, their own needs, their own dreams. When you learn to speak their language, to frame everything in terms of what matters to them, you unlock a level of connection and influence that might otherwise take years to achieve. I once worked with a brilliant scientist who was struggling to get funding for his research. His presentations were technically perfect, filled with compelling data and groundbreaking discoveries, but he couldn't seem to convince investors to support his work. When we analyzed his approach, we discovered the problem. He was talking about what excited him as a scientist: complex molecular interactions and technical breakthroughs. We helped him reframe his presentation to focus on what excited investors: market potential, practical applications, return on investment. The transformation was immediate. His next presentation secured more funding than all his previous attempts combined. The science hadn't changed, but the way he talked about it had. This principle isn't just about business. It transforms personal relationships as well. I remember a mother who was frustrated that her teenage son wouldn't talk to her about his life. Every conversation felt like pulling teeth. Then she made one crucial change. Instead of asking about what she was interested in, grades, homework, college plans, she started asking about what interested him: his favorite video games, the YouTube channels he watched, the music he loved. Suddenly, their conversations came alive. Her son didn't just talk, he opened up. And through these conversations about his interests, she found natural ways to discuss the things that concerned her as a parent. But here's what makes this principle challenging. It requires us to step outside ourselves, to set aside our natural tendency to talk about what interests us, to invest time and energy in discovering and genuinely engaging with what interests others. Think about the last time you were really excited about something, a hobby, a project, an idea. Remember how you wanted to share it with everyone? Remember how their eyes glazed over when you launched into detailed explanations? Now imagine if you had first discovered what excited them about your subject. Imagine if you had connected your passion to their interests. I've seen this principle work miracles in the most unlikely situations. A real estate agent who was struggling to sell a difficult property stopped talking about square footage and started talking about the perfect art studio space because she had discovered her potential buyer was a painter, a teacher who transformed, a disruptive student by connecting mathematics to the student's passion for basketball, a marriage counselor who helped couples reconnect by helping them rediscover each other's interests. Here's how to master this principle. Become genuinely curious about other people's interests. Ask questions that help you understand not just what they're interested in, but why. Look for connections between their interests and your message. Frame your ideas in terms of what matters to them. Show sincere enthusiasm for their passions. Remember, this isn't about manipulation. It's about genuine connection. When you take a real interest in what matters to others, you build authentic relationships that benefit everyone involved. I once watched a master salesperson at work. Instead of launching into his pitch, he spent the first 20 minutes learning about his prospect's business. Not just surface details, but deep understanding. When he finally presented his product, every feature was connected to a specific need or interest the prospect had expressed. The sale wasn't just successful, it was the beginning of a long-term business relationship. Because he hadn't just sold a product, he had demonstrated a genuine understanding of his customers' interests. But here's a crucial warning. Don't fake interest. People can sense insincerity, and nothing damages trust faster than pretending to. Care about something you don't. The key is to find genuine connections between their interests and your message. Think about your own experience. When was the last time someone showed real interest in what matters to you? How did it make you feel? How did it affect your relationship with that person? Master this principle, and you'll transform the way you connect with others. Because when you talk in terms of other people's interests, you're not just communicating, you're connecting. You're not just sharing information, you're sharing understanding. Remember, the most interesting subject to any person is themselves and their interests. Learn to speak that language, and you'll never lack for attention or influence. Principle number 9. Make the other person feel important, and do it sincerely. Let me share with you one of the most powerful moments I've witnessed in human relations. It happened in a busy hospital emergency room. A young doctor was dealing with an elderly patient who was confused, frightened, and becoming increasingly agitated. Instead of rushing through the examination, the doctor pulled up a chair, sat at eye level with the patient, and said something remarkable. "Sir, I can see that you've lived a long and meaningful life. The wedding ring you're wearing looks like it has decades of stories behind it. Would you tell me about your wife while I check your vital signs?" In that moment, everything changed. The patient's anxiety melted away. He began sharing stories about his 60-year marriage. The medical examination, which had been impossible moments before, proceeded smoothly. The doctor hadn't just treated a patient, he had honored a person. This brings us to our 9th principle. Make the other person feel important, and do it sincerely. This principle touches something so fundamental to human nature that mastering it can transform every relationship in your life. Consider this truth. Every person you meet has a deep, unspoken hunger to feel important. Not famous, not superior, but important. To feel that their life has meaning, that their presence matters, that their contribution counts. I once worked with a company president who was brilliant at strategy but struggling with team morale. His employees were leaving, productivity was dropping, and he couldn't understand why. When we analyzed his leadership style, we discovered something crucial. He was so focused on results that he had forgotten about the humans achieving those results. We implemented a simple change. Before every meeting, he would take a moment to acknowledge someone's specific contribution, not generic praise, but precise recognition of how their work mattered to the company's mission. The transformation was remarkable. Within months, turnover dropped, engagement soared, and productivity reached new heights. But here's what makes this principle challenging. It must be sincere. People have an almost supernatural ability to detect false praise. When you make someone feel important, it must come from genuine recognition of their value. I remember working with a young manager who thought she understood this principle. She started ending every interaction with, "You're amazing," but her team's engagement actually decreased. Why? Because generic praise, however positive, doesn't make people feel truly important. It's specific recognition of genuine value that touches the human heart. We worked together to transform her approach. Instead of generic praise, she learned to notice and acknowledge specific contributions. The way you handled that client crisis yesterday showed real leadership means infinitely more than "you're amazing." Here's what making others feel important looks like in practice. Notice and acknowledge specific contributions. Show genuine interest in their expertise. Ask for their advice in their areas of knowledge. Remember and reference their past achievements. Connect their work to larger, meaningful outcomes. But remember, this isn't about manipulation. It's about genuine recognition of human worth. Every person you meet has value, has knowledge, has experience that you don't. Acknowledging that isn't flattery. It's truth. I've seen this principle transform the most challenging situations. A teacher who turned around a troubled classroom by finding something to genuinely admire in each student. A sales manager who built the most loyal client base in his company by making each customer feel valued, not just served. A parent who helped a struggling child blossom by noticing and celebrating small victories. Consider this story. A new employee was struggling to fit into a highly technical team. Her technical skills were solid, but not exceptional. But she had something special. She noticed and acknowledged the unique contributions of each team member. She didn't just praise their work, she showed genuine interest in their expertise. Within 6 months, she had become the heart of the team, improving not just morale, but collaboration and innovation. The power of this principle extends beyond professional situations. I remember a marriage counselor sharing her most effective advice. Spend less time trying to be important to your partner and more time making your partner feel important to you. But here's a crucial warning. Don't confuse making others feel important with making them feel superior. True importance comes from genuine value, not artificial elevation. The goal isn't to diminish yourself, it's to recognize the real worth in others. Think about your own experience. When was the last time someone made you feel truly important? Not just complimented, not just praised, but genuinely valued. How? Did it affect your relationship with that person? How did it affect your performance? Master this principle, and you'll transform the way people respond to you, because when you make others feel genuinely important, you're not just being nice. You're answering one of the deepest human needs. You're affirming their value in the world. Remember, every person you meet is carrying an invisible sign that reads, "Make me feel important." Answer that unspoken request sincerely, and you'll unlock levels of cooperation and loyalty that might otherwise take years to achieve. Principle number 10, win people to your way of thinking, without argument. Let me share a story that changed my understanding of human nature forever. 2 experienced negotiators were working on a complex business deal. The first negotiator came armed with facts, figures, and bulletproof logic. The second came with something different, curiosity and an open mind. The first negotiator presented his case brilliantly, countering every objection with perfect reasoning. But with each logical victory, the atmosphere grew more tense, the resistance stronger. The second negotiator took a different approach. Instead of arguing, he asked questions. Instead of defending positions, he explored concerns. Instead of winning debates, he built understanding. Guess which one closed the deal? This brings us to our 10th principle. Win people to your way of thinking, without argument. It's a principle so powerful that mastering it can transform every difficult conversation in your life. Consider this truth. No one in the history of humanity has ever been argued into changing their mind. You can win the debate and lose the person. You can be right and still be wrong in the way that matters most, in your ability to influence and connect. I once worked with a brilliant engineer who was frustrated because his team wouldn't adopt his clearly superior technical solution. His logic was flawless, his data impeccable. But the more he argued for his approach, the more his team resisted. When we analyzed the situation, we discovered something crucial. He was so focused on proving his point that he had forgotten to understand their concerns. We transformed his approach completely. Instead of trying to win arguments, he started asking questions. Instead of defending his solution, he explored why people preferred different approaches. Instead of pushing his way of thinking, he drew out others' thoughts. The result? His team not only adopted his solution, they improved it with insights he would never have discovered through argument. But here's what makes this principle challenging. It requires us to set aside our ego, our need to be right, our desire to win. It asks us to value understanding over victory, connection over conquest. I remember working with a mother who was locked in constant arguments with her teenage daughter about screen time. Every conversation became a battle, with both sides armed with statistics and examples. We helped her change her approach. Instead of arguing about screen time, she started exploring why these digital connections were so important to her daughter. The arguments stopped. Real conversation began. And together they found a solution that neither would have discovered through debate. Here's how to win people to your way of thinking without argument. Begin with points of agreement. Find common ground. Listen with genuine curiosity to understand their perspective. Ask questions that help them examine their own thinking. Share experiences rather than arguments. Let them save face. Make it easy for them to change their mind. But remember, this isn't about manipulation or avoiding conflict. It's about finding a better way to resolve differences and influence thinking. I've seen this principle transform the most entrenched conflicts. A sales executive who turned his most vocal critic into his strongest advocate, not by arguing, but by understanding and addressing the real concerns behind the criticism. A team leader who united a divided department, not by proving who was right, but by helping everyone feel heard and understood. Consider this story. Two siblings were locked in a bitter dispute over their family business. Each had lawyers, each had evidence, each was certain they were right. Then one sister did something unexpected. She stopped arguing. Instead, she invited her brother for coffee and asked about his vision for the company's future. That conversation began a transformation, not because either side surrendered their interests, but because they found a way to understand each other without argument. Within months, they had crafted a solution that served both their needs better than either's original position. The power of this principle extends beyond business and family. I watched a community leader transform a heated public debate about a controversial development project. Instead of arguing with opponents, he created forums where people could share their concerns and visions for the community. The project that emerged was better than the original plan and had widespread support. But here's a crucial warning. Avoiding argument doesn't mean avoiding difficult conversations. It means approaching them differently. Instead of trying to defeat the other person's position, seek to understand it. Instead of attacking their thinking, help them explore it. Think about your own experience. When was the last time someone argued you into changing your mind? Now think about times when your thinking has shifted. Wasn't it usually through exploration, understanding, and discovery rather than debate? Master this principle, and you'll transform the way you handle differences. Because when you win people to your way of thinking without argument, you don't just get agreement, you get commitment. You don't just win the point, you win the person. Remember, the goal isn't to win debates, it's to win hearts and minds. And that never happens through argument, no matter how logical or correct you may be. Why arguments never work, even when you're right. Let me share a moment of profound realization I witnessed. A senior executive was in the middle of a heated argument with his team about a new strategy. His logic was impeccable, his data solid, his reasoning unassailable. he was winning every point in the debate. And with each victory, he was losing something far more valuable: his team's trust and commitment. This brings us to one of the most important truths in human relations. Arguments never work, even when you're right. In fact, being right can sometimes be the biggest obstacle to actually achieving what you want. Consider this paradox. The more forcefully you argue your position, the more strongly people tend to defend theirs. The harder you push, the more they resist. The more evidence you present, the more they entrench themselves in their opposing views. I once worked with a brilliant researcher who couldn't understand why his colleagues wouldn't adopt his clearly superior methodology. His frustration was palpable. "I've shown them the data," he would say. "I've proven I'm right." What he didn't realize was that his very certainty, his need to be right, was creating resistance. We work together to understand something fundamental about human nature. People don't resist facts nearly as much as they resist being proved wrong. The moment an interaction becomes an argument, psychology shifts. It's no longer about finding truth or the best solution. It's about defending one's position, one's identity, one's ego. Think about your own experience. When was the last time you changed your mind because someone argued you into it? When was the last time being proved wrong in an argument made you feel good about the other person or their ideas? I remember working with two business partners whose relationship was falling apart over strategic disagreements. Each had compelling arguments. Each had evidence to support their position. Each was, in some ways, right. And their arguments were destroying their partnership. We helped them transform their approach. Instead of trying to prove who was right, they started exploring what was right for the business. Instead of arguments, they had discussions. Instead of debates, they had dialogues. The solution they eventually found was better than either of their original positions. Here's why arguments fail even when you're right. They trigger defensive responses. The moment someone feels attacked, their mind closes to new information. They create emotional resistance. People respond to the tone of an argument more than its content. They make people feel diminished. No one likes to be proved wrong or feel stupid. They focus on winning rather than understanding. They damage relationships, even when you win. But here's what makes this truth challenging. Sometimes you really are right. Sometimes the facts are on your side. Sometimes the other person's position is clearly incorrect. The temptation to argue, to prove your point, to win through logic can be overwhelming. I've seen this dynamic play out in countless situations. A parent arguing with a teenager about risky behavior. A manager arguing with an employee about performance issues. A spouse arguing about financial decisions. In each case, one person might have been entirely correct in their position and entirely wrong in their approach. Consider this story. A team leader was facing resistance to a necessary change. In procedures, her first approach was to argue the case, present the data, prove she was right. The resistance grew stronger. Then she tried something different. Instead of arguing for the change, she invited her team to help solve the problems that made the change necessary. The transformation was remarkable. The same people who had resisted her. Why arguments never work even when you're right. Let me share a moment of profound realization I witnessed. A senior executive was in the middle of a heated argument with his team about a new strategy. His logic was impeccable, his data solid, his reasoning unassailable. He was winning every point in the debate. And with each victory, he was losing something far more valuable: his team's trust and commitment. This brings us to one of the most important truths in human relations. Arguments never work, even when you're right. In fact, being right can sometimes be the biggest obstacle to actually achieving what you want. Consider this paradox. The more forcefully you argue your position, the more strongly people tend to defend theirs. The harder you push, the more they resist. The more evidence you present, the more they entrench themselves in their opposing views. I once worked with a brilliant researcher who couldn't understand why his colleagues wouldn't adopt his clearly superior methodology. His frustration was palpable. "I've shown them the data," he would say. "I've proven I'm right." What he didn't realize was that his very certainty, his need to be right, was creating resistance. We work together to understand something fundamental about human nature. People don't resist facts nearly as much as they resist being proved wrong. The moment an interaction becomes an argument, psychology shifts. It's no longer about finding truth or the best solution. It's about defending one's position, one's identity, one's ego. Think about your own experience. When was the last time you changed your mind because someone argued you into it? When was the last time being proved wrong in an argument made you feel good about the other person or their ideas? I remember working with two business partners whose relationship was falling apart over strategic disagreements. Each had compelling arguments. Each had evidence to support their position. Each was in some ways right, and their arguments were destroying their partnership. We helped them transform their approach. Instead of trying to prove who was right, they started exploring what was right for the business. Instead of arguments, they had discussions. Instead of debates, they had dialogues. The solution they eventually found was better than either of their original positions. Here's why arguments fail, even when you're right. They trigger defensive responses. The moment someone feels attacked, their mind closes to new information. They create emotional resistance. People respond to the tone of an argument more than its content. They make people feel diminished. No one likes to be proved wrong or feel stupid. They focus on winning rather than understanding. They damage relationships, even when you win. But here's what makes this truth challenging. Sometimes you really are right. Sometimes the facts are on your side. Sometimes the other person's position is clearly incorrect. The temptation to argue, to prove your point, to win through logic can be overwhelming. I've seen this dynamic play out in countless situations. A parent arguing with a teenager about risky behavior. A manager arguing with an employee about performance issues. A spouse arguing about financial decisions. In each case, one person might have been entirely correct in their position and entirely wrong in their approach. Consider this story. A team leader was facing resistance to a necessary change in procedures. Her first approach was to argue the EM case, present the data, prove she was right. The resistance grew stronger. Then she tried something different. Instead of arguing for the change, she invited her team to help solve the problems that made the change necessary. The transformation was remarkable. The same people who had resisted her arguments became champions of the change when they felt ownership in the solution. But here's something crucial to understand. Avoiding arguments doesn't mean avoiding difficult conversations. It doesn't mean surrendering your position or compromising your principles. It means approaching differences in a way that opens minds rather than closes them. I watched a master negotiator handle a particularly contentious situation. Instead of arguing his position, he asked questions. Instead of defending his view, he explored others' perspectives. Instead of trying to win, he tried to understand. The result? He achieved more than he could have through any argument. Here's how to handle disagreements without arguing. Start with points of agreement. Ask questions that help others examine their own thinking. Share experiences rather than arguments. Make it easy for others to change their minds without losing face. Focus on understanding before trying to be understood. The power of this approach extends beyond professional situations. I remember a couple on the brink of divorce over financial disagreements. Every discussion became an argument. Every argument made things worse. Then they learned to approach their differences differently. Instead of arguing about spending habits, they started exploring their fears and hopes about money. Instead of proving who was right, they worked to understand each other's perspectives. Their marriage didn't just survive, it strengthened. Because when they stopped arguing and started understanding, they found solutions neither had considered before. But here's a warning. This isn't about being passive or avoiding conflict. It's about handling differences in a way that builds relationships rather than damages them. Sometimes the most powerful response to potential argument is a thoughtful question. Help me understand why you see it that way. Think about the arguments in your life right now. What if you approached each one not as a battle to be won, but as an opportunity to understand? What if instead of preparing your counter-arguments, you prepared your questions? What if instead of trying to prove you're right, you try to discover what's right? Master this understanding, and you'll transform the way you handle differences, because the goal isn't to win arguments, it's to achieve outcomes. And the best outcomes usually come not from arguing, even when you're right, but from exploring, understanding, and finding solutions together. Remember, being right isn't enough. How you handle being right often matters more than being right itself. When you let go of the need to win arguments, you open the door to something far more valuable, the ability to actually influence and create positive change. Admit your mistakes. Quickly and emphatically, let me share a story that changed my understanding of leadership forever. Two CEOs faced similar crises in their companies. Both had made decisions that led to significant problems. The first CEO spent weeks defending his choice, explaining his reasoning, and deflecting blame. The second CEO did something different. In an all-company meeting, she stood up and said simply, "I made a mistake. It was my decision, and it was wrong. Now, let's talk about how we fix it." The first company spent months dealing with falling, morale, and internal conflict. The second company transformed a potential crisis into a moment of unity and growth. The difference? The courage to admit mistakes quickly and emphatically. This brings us to one of the most counterintuitive truths. In human relations, your mistakes, properly handled, can become powerful tools for building trust and influence. Not despite admitting them, but because you admit them. Consider this paradox. The more quickly and completely you admit your mistakes, the less time people spend focused on them. The more you try to defend or explain away your mistakes, the more attention you draw to them. I once worked with a young manager who was terrified of admitting mistakes. "If I admit I'm wrong," he told me, "I'll lose all credibility with my team." We tracked what actually happened when he made mistakes. When he defended himself, the team's trust decreased. When he tried to explain away his errors, their respect diminished. But when he finally learned to admit mistakes quickly and emphatically, something remarkable happened. His team's trust and respect grew stronger, because here's what he discovered. People don't expect perfection. They expect honesty. They don't need leaders who never make mistakes. They need leaders who have the integrity to admit them and the wisdom to learn from them. Think about your own experience. When someone wrongs you, what do you want most? Usually it's not compensation or revenge. It's acknowledgement. You want them to admit what they did and show genuine understanding of how it affected you. I remember working with two business partners whose relationship was nearly destroyed by a mistake. One partner had made a significant decision without consulting the other. Instead of admitting the error immediately, he spent weeks justifying his actions, explaining his reasoning, defending his choice. The relationship deteriorated with each explanation. Then we helped him try a different approach. He called a meeting with his partner and said 4 simple sentences. "I made a mistake. I should have consulted you. There's no excuse for that." How can we move forward? The transformation was immediate. Months of tension dissolved in moments. Not because the mistake was erased, but because it was finally acknowledged properly. Here's why quick and emphatic admission of mistakes works so powerfully. It disarms anger and resentment. It shows respect for others' feelings and perspectives. It demonstrates security and self-awareness. It shifts focus from blame to solutions. It builds trust through vulnerability. But here's what makes this principle challenging. Our natural instinct is to defend, explain, justify. Admitting mistakes quickly and emphatically feels dangerous. It feels like we're making ourselves vulnerable to judgment or attack. I've seen this principle transform the most difficult situations. A doctor who made a procedural error. Instead of the usual defensive approach, she immediately admitted her mistake to the patient and family, explained what happened, and detailed steps to prevent similar errors. Not only did she avoid a potential lawsuit, she strengthened the patient's trust in her care. Consider this story. A senior executive sent a company-wide email containing incorrect information about upcoming changes. Within hours, people were confused, anxious, spreading rumors. His first instinct was to send clarifying emails explaining what he actually meant. Instead, he did something braver. He called an all-hands meeting and started with these words, "I messed up. The information I sent was wrong. I created unnecessary anxiety for all of you, and I'm sorry." The result? Instead of weeks of damage control, the situation was resolved in a day. More importantly, his willingness to admit his mistake openly and emphatically actually increased his team's confidence in his leadership. But here's a crucial warning. This isn't about excessive self-blame or constant apology. It's about clean, clear, emphatic admission of genuine mistakes. When you've erred, admit it fully and quickly. Then focus on solutions and moving forward. Think about mistakes you might be defending right now. What would happen if you simply admitted them? Not with explanations or justifications, but with clean, clear acknowledgement? What energy might be freed up for more productive purposes? Master this principle, and you'll transform the way people respond to your mistakes. Because when you admit errors quickly and emphatically, you do more than clear the air. You build trust, demonstrate integrity, and create an environment where others feel safe being honest, too. Remember, your mistakes don't define you. How you handle them does. And sometimes the quickest way past a mistake is straight through it, with honest, emphatic acknowledgement leading the way. Let the other person save face. Let me share a moment I witnessed that perfectly illustrates the power of this principle. A senior military commander was dealing with a junior officer who had made a serious but not catastrophic error in judgment. During a training exercise, the commander had every right to reprimand the officer publicly. Instead, he did something remarkable. He called the officer into his office and said, "Lieutenant, I've made similar mistakes in my career. Let's talk about what we both learned from them." That commander understood something profound about human nature. When you let people save face, you don't just preserve their dignity, you earn their loyalty. This brings us to one of the most subtle yet powerful principles in human relations. Let the other person save face. It's a principle that can transform conflicts into collaborations, enemies into allies, and mistakes into opportunities for growth. Consider this truth. Every person you meet is fighting a battle to maintain their sense of dignity and self-worth. When you threaten that, you create an enemy. When you protect it, you create an ally. I once worked with a CEO who was known for his brilliant business mind but struggled with high turnover in his executive team. When we analyzed his leadership style, we discovered something crucial. He had a habit of correcting people's mistakes in ways that humiliated them, even if that wasn't his intention. We worked together to transform his approach. Instead of pointing out errors in meetings, he started having private conversations. Instead of highlighting mistakes, he began discussing opportunities for improvement. Instead of demanding explanations, he started exploring solutions. The change in his company's culture was remarkable. Not because he lowered his standards, but because he found a way to maintain excellence while preserving dignity. But here's what makes this principle challenging. Sometimes it feels like people don't deserve to save face. Sometimes their mistakes are so clear, their errors so obvious, that public correction seems not just appropriate, but necessary. I remember working with two department heads locked in a bitter conflict. One had made a significant error that affected the other's team. The wrong department head had every right to demand public accountability. Instead, she did something different. She proposed a joint solution-finding session treating the problem. as a shared challenge rather than an opportunity for blame. The result? Not only was the immediate issue resolved, but the departments developed a collaborative relationship that prevented similar problems in the future. Here's why letting others save face works so powerfully. It preserves relationships while addressing problems. It focuses energy on solutions rather than blame. It builds trust and loyalty. It encourages openness about mistakes. It creates an environment of psychological safety. The power of this principle extends far beyond professional situations. I watched a marriage counselor transform a couple's dynamic by helping them understand this principle. Instead of winning arguments by proving each other wrong, they learned to address issues while preserving each other's dignity. Consider this story. A team leader discovered that one of his best employees had made a mistake that cost the company a significant amount of money. The easy response would have been to reprimand her publicly, make an example of the error. Instead, he met with her privately and said, "We've all made costly mistakes. What matters now is how we learn from this and prevent it from happening again." That employee not only learned from the mistake, she became one of the most loyal and productive members of the team. Why? Because her leader understood that preserving dignity is more important than preserving pride. But here's a crucial warning. Letting others save face isn't about ignoring problems or avoiding accountability. It's about handling issues in ways that solve problems while preserving relationships. Think about situations in your life where someone is in error, where you have the right to point out mistakes, where you could win the argument. Now consider, what would happen if your primary concern was not proving them wrong, but preserving their dignity while addressing the issue? I've seen this principle transform the most hostile situations. A negotiator who turned a bitter contract dispute into a collaborative solution by finding ways for both parties to back down gracefully. A teacher who helped a struggling student improve by focusing on progress rather than mistakes. A parent who helped a teenager make better decisions by offering private guidance instead of public criticism. The art of letting others save face requires wisdom and restraint. It means resisting the temptation to prove you're right, even when you are. It means finding ways to correct errors without creating shame. It means understanding that how you handle people's mistakes often matters more than the mistakes themselves. Master this principle, and you'll transform the way people respond to correction and criticism. Because when you let others save face, you do more than preserve their dignity. You create an environment where people feel safe enough to admit mistakes, take risks, and grow. Remember, in the end, it's not about who's right or wrong. It's about achieving positive outcomes while preserving human dignity. And sometimes the fastest way to achieve your goals is to help others maintain their sense of self-worth along the way. Give others a fine reputation to live up. To let me share a story that perfectly illustrates the transformative power of this principle. A high school teacher was given what everyone called the problem class, students who had been labeled as troublemakers and underachievers. Instead of accepting these labels, she did something remarkable. On the first day of class, she told them she had heard they were the class with the most leadership potential in the school. "I've been told," she said, "that this class has students who think differently, who question conventional wisdom, who aren't afraid to challenge ideas. These are the qualities of leaders, and I'm excited to help develop that potential." The transformation was remarkable. Within weeks, these troublemakers began living up to their new reputation as leaders. By the end of the year, they had the highest improvement rate in the school. This brings us to one of the most powerful principles in human relations. Give others a fine reputation to live up to. When you define people by their potential rather than their past, you create a space for transformation. Consider this truth. People tend to become what the most important people in their lives think they are. When you give someone a reputation to live up to, you're not just describing them, you're helping shape who they become. I once worked with a manager who was struggling with an underperforming team. His approach had been to constantly point out their failings, hoping to motivate improvement. Instead, morale plummeted and performance got worse. When we analyzed the situation, we discovered he was creating a self-fulfilling prophecy of failure. We transformed his approach completely. Instead of focusing on their current performance, he began talking about their potential. He started treating them like the high-performing team he wanted them to become. In team meetings, he would say things like, "With the creativity and problem-solving skills in this room, I know we can find an innovative solution." The change was dramatic. Within months, the team wasn't just meeting expectations, they were exceeding them. Why? Because they were living up to the fine reputation their leader had given them. But here's what makes this principle challenging. It requires faith. You must be willing to see people not as they are, but as they could be. You must be willing to bet on potential rather than past performance. I remember working with a sales director who had inherited a representative with a poor track record. Instead of focusing on past failures, she told him, "I've watched you with customers. You have a natural ability to connect with people and understand their needs. That's rare and valuable. Let's build on that strength." Within 6 months, he had become one of the top performers in the company. Not because his basic abilities had changed, but because someone had given him a new reputation to live up to. Here's why this principle works so powerfully. It creates a positive, self-fulfilling prophecy. It gives people permission to leave past failures behind. It provides a clear vision of positive potential. It builds confidence through expressed faith. It motivates through inspiration rather than fear. The power of this principle extends beyond professional situations. I watched a parent transform a troubled relationship with a teenager by shifting from criticism to expressed faith in their character. Instead of focusing on current behaviors, she began talking about the leadership qualities she saw emerging. Consider this story. A new supervisor took over a department known for resistance to change. Instead of trying to force compliance, he gathered his team and said, "I've heard this department has people with deep experience and strong principles. Those are exactly the qualities we need to guide us through these changes." That reframing changed everything. The same people who had resisted previous changes became thoughtful advocates for improvement, because someone had given them a new reputation to live up to. But here's a crucial warning. This isn't about empty flattery or ignoring real issues. It's about identifying genuine potential and expressing authentic faith in people's ability to grow into it. Think about the people in your life who are underperforming or causing problems. What if, instead of focusing on their current behavior, you identified their positive potential? What if you gave them a new reputation to live up to? I've seen this principle transform the most challenging situations. A teacher who turned around a difficult student by focusing on their natural leadership qualities. A coach who developed a lazy athlete into a team captain by expressing faith in their potential. A spouse who helped their partner grow by consistently pointing out their strengths rather than their weaknesses. The art of giving others a fine reputation to live up to requires wisdom and sincerity. You must be able to see past current behavior to genuine potential. You must have the courage to express faith in people who haven't yet proven themselves. You must be patient enough to let them grow into the reputation you've given them. Master this principle, and you'll transform the way people respond to your leadership. Because when you give others a fine reputation to live up to, you do more than describe their potential. You help create the conditions for that potential to become reality. Remember, people often become what you encourage them to be, not what you nag them to be. Give them a fine reputation to live up to, and you give them a gift that can transform their future. Influence at home. Using these principles with family. Let me share a story that transformed my understanding of how these principles work in our most important relationships. A father came to me, frustrated and worried about his teenage son. Every interaction had become a battle. Every conversation ended in conflict. Every attempt to guide or influence his son's behavior seemed to push them further apart. "I've tried everything," he told me. "I've explained the consequences. I've set clear rules. I've used rewards and punishments. Nothing works. It's like the more I try to influence him, the more he resists." This brings us to one of the most crucial applications of our principles, using them at home with the people who matter most. Because here's a profound truth. The principles that work in business or public life work even more powerfully in our intimate relationships. Consider this paradox. We often treat strangers with more diplomacy than we do our own family members. We remember to smile at clients but forget to smile at our spouse. We carefully avoid criticizing colleagues but freely condemn our children. We listen patiently to acquaintances but interrupt our siblings. I once worked with a mother who was a highly successful executive, known for her ability to motivate and inspire her team. But at home, she struggled with her children's behavior and resistance. When we analyzed the situation, we discovered something striking. She was using completely different approaches at home than she used at work. At work, she practiced appreciation, listened carefully, and made people feel important. At home, she criticized, commanded, and focused on problems. Once she began applying the same principles at home that made her successful at work, her family relationships transformed. But here's what makes this challenging. Family relationships carry emotional weight that professional relationships don't. Our buttons get pushed more easily. Our patience wears thin more quickly. Our need to be right becomes more intense. I remember working with a couple whose marriage was struggling. Both were successful professionals, skilled at managing complex work relationships. But at home, they had fallen into patterns of criticism, defensiveness, and argument. We helped them apply our principles to their marriage. Don't criticize, condemn, or complain. Give honest appreciation. Arouse in the other person an eager want. Become genuinely interested in each other. Listen more than you speak. Make your partner feel important. The transformation in their relationship was remarkable. Not because they learned new skills, but because they started using their best relationship skills at home. Consider this story. A mother was struggling with her young daughter's messy room. Every request turned into a battle. Every conversation ended in tears. Then she tried something different. Instead of criticizing the mess, she became genuinely interested in how her daughter wanted her room to feel. Instead of demanding cleanup, she aroused an eager want for an organized space. The result? Not only did the room get clean, but mother and daughter developed a deeper connection through the process. Why? Because influence flows naturally through positive relationships. Here's why these principles work so powerfully at home. They build emotional safety instead of triggering defensiveness. They create connection instead of distance. They inspire cooperation instead of resistance. They develop trust instead of resentment. They demonstrate love instead of just declaring it. The power of these principles becomes even more evident in parent-child relationships. I watched a father transform his relationship with his teenage daughter by simply applying the principle of genuine listening. Instead of lecturing about grades or behavior, he started asking questions about her dreams, her fears, her interests. Within weeks, their relationship had shifted from conflict to conversation, not because he lowered his standards or stopped caring about grades and behavior, but because he built a relationship strong enough to carry influence. But here's a crucial warning. These principles aren't tricks or techniques. They're ways of building genuine, positive relationships. They work at home only when they come from a place of sincere care and respect. Think about your own family relationships. How often do you practice these principles at home? How different might your relationships be if you consistently applied the same level of interpersonal skill you use in your professional life? I've seen these principles heal the most damaged family relationships. A brother and sister who hadn't spoken in years, reunited through genuine listening and appreciation. a father and son who rebuilt trust through honest admission of mistakes, a family that transformed their dynamic by making each member feel truly important. The art of influence at home requires patience, consistency, and genuine care. You must be willing to set aside the quick fix of authority for the lasting power of positive relationship. You must be ready to lead by example, not just instruction. Master these principles at home and you'll transform your most important relationships. Because when you build influence through positive connection, you don't just change behaviors, you strengthen bonds that can last a lifetime. Remember, the people closest to us deserve our best selves, not just what's left over after we've been our best with everyone else. When you bring these principles home, you create a foundation for lasting family harmony and growth. Influence in conflict, turning enemies into allies. Let me share a story that perfectly illustrates the transformative power of turning adversaries into allies. Two business owners in a small town had been bitter rivals for years. Their competing stores had created an atmosphere of hostility that affected the entire community. Then one of them did something unexpected. When his rival's store was damaged by a storm, instead of celebrating his competitor's misfortune, he offered to share his retail space until the repairs were complete. That single act of generosity didn't just help a competitor. It transformed an enemy into an ally. Today, those former rivals collaborate on community projects and even share resources during busy seasons. This brings us to one of the most powerful applications of our principles, the art of turning enemies into allies. Because here's a profound truth: every enemy is a potential ally waiting for the right approach. Consider this paradox. The more energy we spend fighting enemies, the less we have available for creating value. Yet, when we transform enemies into allies, we don't just end the conflict, we multiply our effectiveness through collaboration. I once worked with a senior executive who was locked in a bitter rivalry with another department head. Their conflict was affecting productivity, morale, and the company's bottom line. When we analyzed the situation, we discovered something crucial. They were so focused on proving each other wrong that they had forgotten they shared the same ultimate goals. We transformed their approach completely. Instead of focusing on their differences, they began exploring their shared interests. Instead of competing for resources, they started looking for ways to help each other succeed. The change in their relationship and their results was remarkable. But here's what makes this challenging. Turning enemies into allies requires us to overcome our natural instincts. When someone opposes us, we want to oppose them back. When someone attacks us, we want to defend or counterattack. Breaking this cycle requires both wisdom and courage. I remember working with two community leaders who were on opposite sides of a contentious local issue. Each saw the other as an enemy of progress. We helped them understand that their shared commitment to the community's well-being was stronger than their differences in approach. Here's why turning enemies into allies works so powerfully. It transforms negative energy into positive collaboration. It creates solutions that neither side could achieve alone. It builds stronger relationships through overcome adversity. It demonstrates leadership that others want to follow. It creates lasting change through understanding rather than force. The power of this approach becomes even more evident in personal conflicts. I watched a long-standing family feud transform when one side made the brave choice to extend an olive branch. Instead of demanding apologies, they offered understanding. Instead of reciting grievances, they looked for common ground. Consider this story. A new manager inherited a team that was hostile to any change she proposed. Instead of trying to force compliance or assert her authority, she did something unexpected. She met with each team member individually, not to defend her ideas, but to understand their concerns and expertise. She discovered that their resistance wasn't about the changes themselves, it was about feeling disrespected and unheard. By acknowledging their experience and incorporating their insights, She turned potential enemies into valuable allies in the change process. But here's a crucial warning. This isn't about surrendering your principles or accepting unacceptable behavior. It's about finding ways to align different interests and perspectives toward shared goals. Think about the conflicts in your life right now. What if you viewed your enemies not as opponents to be defeated, but as potential allies to be won over? What if you focused not on winning arguments, but on finding common ground? I've seen this principle transform the most bitter conflicts. A labor dispute that became a model of collaboration, a neighborhood controversy that led to community improvement, a personal rivalry that blossomed into a powerful partnership. Here are specific strategies for turning enemies into allies. Look for shared interests beneath opposing positions. Acknowledge their concerns and perspective before presenting your own. Find small areas of agreement and build from there. Make it easy for them to move from opposition to collaboration. Focus on future possibilities rather than past grievances. Demonstrate genuine respect for their position and experience. Create opportunities for joint success. The art of turning enemies into allies requires patience, empathy, and strategic thinking. You must be willing to set aside the satisfaction of winning an argument for the greater reward of winning an ally. You must look past current conflicts to see potential collaboration. Master this principle, and you'll transform the way you handle opposition. Because when you turn enemies into allies, you don't just end conflicts. You create partnerships that can achieve far more than either side could alone. Remember, every enemy is a potential ally waiting for the right approach. The energy we spend fighting could be transformed into power for creating, building, and achieving shared success. When you master the art of turning enemies into allies, you don't just reduce conflict, you multiply your ability to create positive change in the world. Social media and influence, applying timeless wisdom. Online, let me share a story that perfectly illustrates how timeless principles of human relations can transform online interactions. A tech executive was facing a social media crisis. A customer's complaint about their product had gone viral, generating thousands of angry comments. Instead of responding with corporate defense or dismissal, she did something unexpected. She replied personally, acknowledged the issue sincerely, and invited the customer to help improve their product. That single, authentic interaction didn't just resolve the crisis. It created a wave of positive engagement that transformed their brand's online presence. The complaining customer became one of their most vocal advocates. This brings us to a crucial application of our principles, how to maintain influence and build relationships in the digital age. Because here's a profound truth. While the platforms may be new, the fundamentals of human nature remain unchanged. Consider this paradox. Social media connects us to more people than ever before, yet many feel more isolated and misunderstood than ever. The same platforms that can build bridges often become battlegrounds. The difference lies not in the technology, but in how we apply timeless principles of human relations. I once worked with a social media influencer who had millions of followers, but was struggling with genuine engagement. When we analyzed her approach, we discovered she was broadcasting rather than connecting, promoting rather than relating. We transformed her strategy by applying our core principles. Show genuine interest in others' lives and stories. Give honest, sincere appreciation. Make others feel important. Listen more than you speak. Talk in terms of others' interests. The change in her online community was remarkable. Engagement deepened. Relationships flourished. Her influence grew not through clever tactics, but through authentic connection. But here's what makes this challenging. Online interactions can feel impersonal and abstract. The absence of face-to-face contact can make it easier to forget we're dealing with real human beings with real feelings, hopes, and fears. I remember working with a company that was trying to build an online community around their brand. They had tried every technical optimization and marketing tactic available. What they hadn't tried was applying basic principles of human relations, responding to comments with genuine interest, acknowledging and appreciating contributions, making each community member feel valued, focusing on building relationships, not just gathering followers. The transformation in their online presence was profound. Their community didn't just grow, it became more engaged, more supportive, more valuable to everyone involved. Here's why these principles work so powerfully online. They cut through digital noise with authentic connection. They build trust in an environment often lacking it. They create genuine engagement rather than superficial interaction. They transform followers into advocates. They build lasting relationships beyond single transactions. The power of these principles becomes even more evident in handling online conflicts. I watched a public figure transform a hostile thread into a constructive dialogue, not through argument or defense, but through genuine listening and respect for different viewpoints. Consider this story. A small business owner was struggling with negative online reviews. Instead of becoming defensive or ignoring them, she began responding with genuine interest in customers' experiences, sincere appreciation for their feedback, and a genuine desire to improve. Within months, her online reputation had transformed, not because the negative reviews disappeared, but because her responses showed such authentic care for customer experience. But here's a crucial warning. These principles aren't about manipulation or creating a false online persona. They're about bringing genuine human connection to digital spaces. The authenticity must be real, even if the medium is virtual. Think about your own online presence. How might it change if you approached each interaction as an opportunity for genuine connection? What if you treated each comment, message, or post as a chance to apply these timeless principles? I've seen these principles transform the most challenging online situations. A controversial post turned into a platform for understanding. A customer complaint became a showcase for exceptional service. A divisive debate evolved into a constructive dialogue. A critical comment thread transformed into a supportive community. Here are specific strategies for applying these principles online. Respond to criticism with understanding rather than defense. Show genuine interest in others' perspectives. Make each interaction personal and meaningful. Focus on building relationships, not just gaining followers. Use your platform to make others feel valued and heard. Handle disagreements with respect and openness. Create content that serves others' interests and needs. The art of online influence requires adapting timeless wisdom to new contexts. You must find ways to convey authentic care through digital means. You must maintain human connection even through technological interfaces. Master these principles in the digital space, and you'll transform your online influence. Because when you bring genuine human connection to social media, you don't just gather followers, you build a community of authentic relationships. Remember, the medium may be digital, but the hearts you're trying to reach are still very human. When you apply timeless principles of human relations to online interactions, you create connections that transcend the limitations of technology, habits that cement influence for life. Let me share a story that perfectly illustrates the power of turning influence principles into daily habits. A young manager was struggling to implement the leadership concepts she had learned. She understood the principles intellectually, but found herself falling back into old patterns under pressure. Then she did something remarkable. She created a morning ritual of reviewing one principle each day and setting a specific intention for how she would practice it. Within months, what had been conscious effort became natural behavior. Her influence grew not through occasional brilliant moments, but through consistent, habitual excellence in human relations. This brings us to one of our most crucial discussions: how to transform these principles from intellectual understanding into automatic behavior. Because here's a profound truth: knowledge isn't power until it becomes habit. Consider this paradox. Many people understand these principles perfectly, yet struggle to apply them consistently. The difference between knowing and doing often lies not in understanding, but in habit formation. I once worked with a senior executive who was brilliant at human relations during important meetings, but would revert to criticism and command during routine interactions. When we analyzed his behavior, we discovered something crucial. He hadn't developed the habits that would make positive human relations his default response. We transformed his approach completely. Instead of trying to remember all the principles at once, we helped him develop specific habits, morning reflection on one principle, 3 planned appreciations each day, regular practice in active listening, evening review of his interactions, weekly assessment of relationship growth. The change in his leadership was remarkable. What had been occasional excellence became consistent influence. But here's what makes this challenging. Habit formation requires patience and deliberate practice. You can't rush the process of turning conscious competence into unconscious excellence. I remember working with a sales professional who understood all our principles but struggled to apply them in high-pressure situations. We helped her develop specific habits that would trigger positive behaviors automatically. Before every call, take 3 deep breaths and remember to listen. After every interaction, note one thing she appreciated about the person during every conversation. Ask at least one question about the other person's interests each morning. Review one principle and plan its application. Every evening, reflect on opportunities taken and missed. Here's why habit formation works so powerfully in developing influence. It removes the need for constant conscious effort. It creates consistency in behavior. It builds trust through reliability. It makes excellence automatic. It preserves energy for handling unique challenges. The power of this approach becomes even more evident under stress. I watched a negotiator maintain perfect composure during a heated discussion, not because she was naturally calm, but because she had developed habits that kicked in automatically under pressure. Consider this story. A teacher was struggling to maintain her positive approach with challenging students. Instead of relying on willpower, she developed specific habits, starting each class by noting something positive about each student, taking 3 deep breaths before responding to disruption, keeping a daily journal of successful interactions, creating morning routines that set a positive tone, establishing evening reflection practices. The result? Her classroom management transformed not through new techniques, but through consistent, habitual application of principles she already knew. But here's a crucial warning. Developing these habits requires deliberate, consistent effort. You can't skip the practice phase and expect automatic excellence. Think about your own application of these principles. Which ones do you use naturally? Which ones require conscious effort? How could you develop habits that make excellence automatic? Here are specific strategies for developing influence habits. Morning preparation. Choose one principle to focus on each day. Visualize specific situations where you'll apply it. Set clear intentions for your interactions. Throughout the day, create triggers for positive behaviors. Practice active listening in every conversation. Look for opportunities to show genuine appreciation. Make notes of successful applications. Evening review. Reflect on your interactions. Celebrate successes. Learn from missed opportunities. Plan improvements for tomorrow. Weekly practice review. All principles. Assess progress in different areas. Plan specific improvements. Celebrate growth and development. Monthly mastery. Focus on one principle deeply each month. Create specific challenges around that principle. Track progress and adjust approaches. Build on successful habits. The art of developing influence habits requires patience, persistence, and systematic practice. You must be willing to start small, build consistently, and trust the process of habit formation. Master this approach to habit development, and you'll transform your influence from occasional success to consistent excellence. Because when these principles become habits, you don't just know how to influence, You become naturally influential. Remember, excellence in human relations isn't about periodic brilliant performances. It's about consistent, habitual application of these timeless principles. When you develop the habits that make these principles automatic, you create a foundation for lasting influence in every area of your life. Lasting friendship and influence, what really matters in the end. Let me share a final story that captures the true essence of everything we've discussed. At a retirement celebration for a beloved company leader, something remarkable happened. Instead of the usual speeches about professional achievements, person after person stood up to share how this leader had touched their lives personally. They didn't talk about profits or promotions. They talked about moments of genuine connection, times when they felt truly heard, instances when this leader had shown faith in them when they doubted themselves. This brings us to our final and most important truth. The real measure of influence isn't in the power you accumulate or the successes you achieve. It's in the lives you touch and the relationships you build. Consider this profound reality. At the end of our journey, we won't remember most of our professional achievements or material successes. What we'll remember, what truly matters, are the connections we've made, the trust we've built, the lives we've impacted positively. I once asked a group of successful leaders what they considered their greatest accomplishment. Almost unanimously, they spoke not of business victories or financial gains, but of relationships they'd built, people they'd mentored, lives they'd helped transform. This reveals something crucial about the nature of lasting influence. It's not about techniques or strategies. It's about genuine human connection. All the principles we've discussed, all the skills we've developed, are ultimately about one thing: building authentic, meaningful relationships that enrich lives. But here's what makes this challenging. In our fast-paced world, it's easy to focus on quick wins and immediate results. Building lasting influence through genuine relationship takes time, patience, and consistent effort. I remember working with an ambitious young professional who was frustrated with his progress. "I'm doing everything right," he said. "I'm using all the techniques, following all the principles, but something's missing." What was missing was the understanding that these principles aren't techniques to be used. They're truths to be lived. Here's why lasting influence matters more than temporary power. It creates ripple effects that continue long after we're gone. It builds relationships that sustain us through challenges. It gives meaning and purpose to our achievements. It creates legacy through the lives we touch. It brings fulfillment that no other success can match. The power of this truth becomes even more evident as time passes. I've watched leaders who focused on power fade into irrelevance, while those who focused on people continue to influence long after leaving their formal positions. Consider this story. A mentor of mine once shared his greatest regret. "I spent my first 20 years focusing on building my influence," he said, "and my next 20 years learning that real influence comes from genuinely caring about people. I wish I'd understood that earlier." But here's the beautiful truth. It's never too late to start building lasting influence through genuine connection. Every interaction is an opportunity. Every relationship is a chance to make a positive impact. Think about the relationships in your life right now. Which ones are built on genuine connection? Which ones need more attention? What legacy of influence are you creating through your daily interactions? Here are the truths that create lasting influence. Genuine care matters more than clever technique. Listening creates stronger bonds than speaking. Trust built slowly lasts longer than trust gained quickly. Small kindnesses often have the biggest impact. Authentic relationships multiply influence naturally. Character matters more than charisma. The lives you touch become your lasting legacy. The art of lasting influence requires wisdom, patience, and genuine care for others. You must be willing to value people over position, choose long-term impact over short-term gain, build trust through consistent character, see potential in others and help them realize it, create positive change that continues without you. Leave. Every relationship better than you found it. Remember this above all. The principles we've discussed aren't just tools for success. They're pathways to meaningful connection. When you apply them with genuine care for others, you don't just build influence. You create a legacy of positive impact that continues long after you're gone. In the end, what matters isn't how many people you led, but how many lives you touched. Not how much power you accumulated, but how much positive difference you made. Not how many followed your direction, but how many grew stronger because of your influence. This is the true measure of lasting influence. Not in what we gain for ourselves, but in what we give to others. Not in the power we accumulate, but in the lives we help transform. Not in the success we achieve, but in the legacy of positive impact we leave behind. As you move forward from here, remember, every interaction is an opportunity to build lasting influence. Every relationship is a chance to make a positive difference. Every moment is an opportunity to create a legacy that continues long after you're gone, because in the end, what really matters isn't the influence we gain, it's the lives we touch, the relationships we build, and the positive change we create in the world.